So in this segment, we're going to be discussing Labour's kind of asylum seeker plans and some of the talk around it. I think I'll give some credit regarding like the Rwanda scheme and the fact that Starmer's called it a gimmick. And I think Beth Rigby's questioning here is particularly embarrassing.
Are you going to actually stop them and cancel flights, or will you let some fly if they're already scheduled?
Well, I think we need a dose of realism here. This isn't going to be a regular flow of flights. There'll be just a few flights taken off.
Yes.
If we get them before the election, and we may well do. But I'm not interested in continuing that. We're going to scrap the scheme. We're not going to schedule flights. There will be no flights scheduled or taking off after the general election if Labour wins that general election.
Okay, that's new, so you'll actually cancel flights. No flights taken off if you win.
I think the scheme is a gimmick. I'm not flogging.
It just looks like she's looking like for a gotcha question, like trying to embarrass him. Like, you think there's going to be no flights, so you're going to cancel the flights. Like, just kind of weird obsession with this scheme is just bizarre to me. And this is pushed by the media, really, or at least this specific journalist in this case.
A dead horse. I'm not prepared to do government by gimmicks. I want to start on day one, not with flights taking off.
Okay,
but by absolutely investing my political capital in the law enforcement.
No flights take off under a Keir Starmer government from day one.
No flights, no Rwanda scheme. Okay. It's a gimmick.
Or maybe she's just looking for a scoop to say she's broken news here. I don't know. It's a bit bizarre to me, this clip, and this is the good here, and now we go into the bad.
The safe and legal routes should play a role in stopping the channel crossings.
Look, I mean, we have, Afghanistan, Hong Kong, there have been routes set up, but I think...
From Afghanistan, the routes aren't working, and that's one of the key problems. I think it's partly because of the fact that, the airport was taken over by the Taliban. So how are people from Afghanistan specifically meant to get here when I think consulates and embassies aren't allowed to deal with refugees from those specific countries? Like Afghanistan, from Hong Kong, it's a different scheme, but, I think this answer's a bit disgusting, to be honest.
The main and the better, the really most effective way to stop the crossings is to break the gangs that are running this in the first place, because they are making...
That's not true, and we'll talk about a clip in a second with Zoe Gardner, where she explains it a lot better than this.
A huge amount of money exploiting very vulnerable people. And they're doing that with thinking that they've got impunity.
So it's tough guy on crime here. And we'll go to the clip with Zoe Gardner. This is really good.
Is forcing people to take more dangerous routes.
Announcing a new border security commander and new border security command. So we need to get more details of this plan. But clamping down in France is also as dangerous as the Rwanda plan. Is that the suggestion?
Yeah, well, there's a direct relationship to the deaths that we're seeing. There have been 22 deaths this year. That's a 450% increase on the same period last year. And as I say, folks on the ground are saying that's directly related to the police operations. So, saying big words like commander and elite police force, it doesn't really get us anywhere if we don't provide the people there with a safe alternative. They need a solution. They exist. They're there. We have to address that.
We've only got a very brief time left, but so should the UK not in any way attempt to stop the small boats?
I don't think anybody's against the operations against smugglers, but what we have to do, again, is take away the market for the smugglers, because you take away one smuggler, but there's still a refugee in a closed border, well, somebody else will fill that market gap. You take away the...
That's the key here, is to stop the market, because you'll always have, regardless of, like, we've seen it with the war on drugs, right? Regardless of that even if you arrest a drug dealer or a whole chain of drug dealers, it doesn't matter because other ones will replace them. It's the same thing with the smugglers. It doesn't matter if you get rid of a lot of them; there'll still be a replacement for them because it's money at the end of the day. So if we create safe points of entry, safe routes, these smugglers wouldn't have a market, because the whole point of them is they supply people with the boats and the fuel necessary to get across the English Channel. If there was no real need for them, they wouldn't have a market. They wouldn't have any money. There would be no incentive to do it.
By providing people with safe ways to travel. And that would be regulated, it would be secure, and I think that would solve the problem much better than either the Rwanda plan or, another elite police force.
So yeah, I think she's 100% correct there. It's Labour talking tough, and people give them credit on that, and they talk about the hushed whispering of kind of the better Labour policies, which we'll discuss in a moment. Again, Starmer kind of doubled down on the safe routes thing before, saying I don't think safe routes is the answer to the vile trade that's being run to put people into small boats. Yvette Cooper talking about how Natalie Elphicke is on the front line of all this, and that Labour's approach isn't working, and the Tories' approach isn't working, and that what's her name, Elphicke, is supporting Labour's approach when Labour's approach isn't going to work either, because again, safe routes are really the key here. The processing centre in France is really the key here. But that processing centre has got to be big enough where it's got to get through a lot of claims, so people aren't incentivised to come across via the channel to get their asylum claim heard here. It's also a further problem of the way the deportations work, that even if your asylum claim isn't successful, you can still, you can't be deported to certain countries, and that's kind of a weird loophole in the system where you can have your asylum claim rejected, but if you're from a country like Iran, they can't deport you to Iran because there's a threat of torture there. So it's very strange the way the asylum system works at times. We've talked about Elphicke already before, and we'll talk about the reality of the situation here. This is from Ollie Dugmore on LBC interviewing someone from Afghanistan.
My wife at the moment is in France, so I tried every option, like normal way, to bring her here. Yeah, I applied for the family reunion application. I put the application. They rejected the application on the basis of she that did not pass the English test.
I genuinely don't understand the criteria we are using for some of the refugees, why would you have a language test if it's about family reunification? Like, there's obviously a family member here and they want to be unified here. Why would there be a language test? It doesn't make any sense.
Okay. So she's not educated. She doesn't speak English. So the only option for me left is to use one of these little boats to bring her over, because she's my wife and we can't live apart. I mean, some people, they just say, okay, turn the boat back to France, wherever they come from, send them back, but they don't know the reality, what we are facing.
And just to be clear, I mean, that reality is death, right? If they'd stayed in Afghanistan, the Taliban would...
Yeah, of course, obviously.
Kill them.
I mean, they're in the run all the time.
Is she scared?
And this is what I mean here, like, I watched, I've got this twice here. I watched, Phil's video on this, talking about how great, Labour schemes are, whatever, right? And we look at the channel crossings, and his analysis is, the Labour Party are going to try and go back to the old 0.7% of GDP for foreign aid, right? And the argument of that's going to help. It's going to help a little bit, sure. Getting a returns program with the EU countries will help a lot more. But again, like, we've seen the Tories try and get that return scheme, and it's not worked. The UK have tried to get a deal with France. France said, go speak to the EU. The EU said, you can't set up arrangements with individual countries. So it's clear that France don't want the return scheme. And so I don't know which other countries would actually want such a program. And we look at, which country these people are coming from. It's predominantly Afghanistan. And it doesn't matter how much foreign aid you increase to Afghanistan. The reality is the Taliban are running it. And so people are always going to be under persecution. And they're always going to try and escape from that. We're the ones that told, Priti Patel, I think, was the Home Secretary at the time, told Afghan refugees to come to the UK by any means, and we would process their applications here, especially the ones that helped serve with British soldiers. And some of those people are the ones that are turning up in small boats because there's no means for them to come here because we didn't set up such a scheme. So it's almost like the government didn't want them to come here, but wanted to save face. And you look at Iran, a despotic regime as well, one where, even if you increase the amount of foreign aid to Iran, that's not going to help save people from, a regime which kidnaps essentially dual citizens and ransoms them, like we saw a couple of years ago. You've got Turkey. Turkey's quite a surprising one. Syria, again, completely decimated by the war. Or their civil war that they had a couple of years ago, I think is still ongoing. Iraq, a country that collapsed really badly, was under ISIS control for a long time. I don't know how stable it is. Vietnam's quite surprising. You've got Albania down here, which there were a lot of Albanian crossings, but I think that's come down because of the fact that we have a returns agreement now with Albania. Others is very high here, but point being is, like, even if you increase the foreign aid, it won't matter. I think a lot of this coincides with Brexit, but also the full Western pullout of Afghanistan in around 2021. That the Brexit would be one of the key ones. But you see here, 2021, you got a lot more people coming to the UK. A lot more refugees would have been leaving Afghanistan because of the war. So this idea that, by increasing the foreign aid budget to, and that the idea that that would help, or having a returns program and things like that, that's not really going to do it. And I think with some of these people, like, they're so desperate to accept half measures and so desperate to look at optics and things like that without actually realizing, like, these are people's lives that we're messing with. They're so desperate for Labour to win, they don't realize, like, this is about, people's lives here. People are dying in the Channel Tunnel. When you listen to this person's story here, like, he's separated from his wife, and if we had a safe route of entry and a proper asylum scheme, they could be united. Instead, this person feels like they're in a situation where he's going to have to put her in a small boat to get to the UK so she can seek asylum here, and we know that crossing is dangerous. We've seen footage of French. French, I don't know what we call them. It's not the French Navy, but trying to turn around boats because the UK government is effectively paying them to do that. This is an incredibly dangerous journey, and it could be resolved by us, having safe points of entry. And that's kind of what Zoe Gardner talks about here. It's not about having command units and all of this stuff. Dealing with the smugglers is good. Like, it's objectively good. Scrapping the Rwanda scheme is objectively good. But, this is like the bare minimum. And the idea that, Labour's hushed tones and the idea that, they've got these other quiet policies that they're going to put through, they're going to make a tremendous difference. Yeah, it will make somewhat of a difference. Having a returns program, if you can get it, if being the key word here, you can get it, would make a big difference. But the problem is you're still going to have people making the crossing initially, which is the first problem. So this is where I kind of get annoyed about the conversation around this. I think if I were, the politics of it is, do you want to fight certain battles? The idea that you shouldn't be fighting the electorate and telling them they're wrong. But if that's the case, you will never get the policies that you want, the policies that are important to you. If the public are against PR, what are you going to do? The public were for Brexit at one point, and then you suddenly told them they were wrong. It doesn't make sense, in my opinion. Especially when some of those people were, when the public voted for Brexit, and some of those people were saying, no, we should push for a soft Brexit or whatever. It didn't really make sense. But public opinion is such a thing that it sways very easily. And at the end of the day, like, these are people's lives we're messing with here. There have been, a lot of channel deaths. And we could resolve that by having safe points of entry, but that's not going to happen because it's not politically popular. So some people are happy to sacrifice morals for politics, for votes. But the question is, we have to ask ourselves as a country, and I think as kind of I do want to ask the audience there, at what point does it just go too far? At what point do you sacrifice too many morals? At what point do you?
I fail to see the logic here. Price to pay for power?
That's the question. Again, we need to keep asking ourselves. It keeps going back to that question, and we keep getting the same answer, which is yes.